over. No turning back, not today. Don't you come running back now. I'm not a home for the shy. Something tells me that I won't miss it. It's the first time that we can't fix it. It's irreversible damage done. The thrill is gone. Ooh, baby, there ain't no one like you. You chose to keep the truth inside. Ooh, baby, gave my all to you. All you did was tell me lies. Something tells me that
Your turn, Yugi boy.
What is up, guys? This is AlintheaYoh coming at you today with an updated version of my Counter Fairy deck. Now, this is the Ties of the Brethren build. Now, I know a lot of you people were looking forward to it, so I digress. I will get straight into it for you. So there are actually a fair amount of different changes in this one, obviously, so we will go over them. So starting us off, we have the 3 Bountiful Artemis. Now, I did actually toy with the idea of cutting this down to 2, simply because the whole idea of this deck is to get to the Ties of the Brethren, and therefore it means that you're going to be hopefully able to see the Bountiful earlier and quicker. In testing, that just doesn't happen. Bountiful is arguably the most important card, or monster card in the deck, so you want to see it as quickly as possible. That then means that you can, if you do have Ties of the Brethren, that means then you can actually use it and go forward with it. So I've really kept it at 3. I did a lot of testing it at 2, and 3 just still works. It's never really that much of a dead draw unless you're top decking and you get that, and that's it. But other than that, you know, that's the only thing where I can really comment. Next up, we have one of my actual favourite cards for this. It's Mel Tile, that is just the Sage of the Sky, and this card is just so good. It's such a good... A lot of people argue that it's a win more card, but it's a real horrible card for your opponent to deal with when they have when they're trying to commit to the board and you have counter traps, because it's a real control card. So if you don't know what it does, basically every time a counter trap is activated, you gain 1,000 life points. Then if Sanctuary in the Sky is on your side of the field, you destroy 1 card your opponent controls as well. So you get 1,000 life points and you get to pop a card every time a counter trap is activated. So it's really good for being able to control your opponent. It means that you can be selective at when you activate counter traps. Now, this is a really important strategy with this card, and I'm just going to spend a little bit of time on it for you. With Sage of the Sky, it means that you don't have to necessarily stop the first thing your opponent's doing. If you do have a counter trap with the Sanctuary in the Sky, it means that you can possibly wait until they commit a couple more cards to the board, then activating a counter trap to stop a further play, and then you have Sage of the Sky, which means that you can pop a card that's already on the field. So you can pop another combo piece that your opponent has. So it means that you can hold back a bit, you can maybe smoke screen what cards you potentially have, and it really puts your opponent in a difficult position because it means that they have to potentially commit a lot to try and get around it, but then you're probably going to be stopping, getting rid of 1 monster at least, or 1 card with a counter trap, and then with Sage of the Sky it means you'll be getting rid of at least another. So that's why I really like it. It's a real good combo piece and should be used very carefully with your other counter traps, because it means that you can get maximum profit out of it. Next up, we have 2 Guiding Ariadne. Now, I've cut it down to 2 only simply because of space issues. There aren't that many, apart from like the Solemn Brigade, there aren't that many major things that really need life points or discard costs. You can kind of deal with it with Minerva and the fact that you are going down the Sanctuary in the Sky and Ties of the Brethren build. It means that Guiding Ariadne is still good and is a target for Ties of the Brethren, but you don't mind if you don't draw it as much. So that's why it's down to 2, but you can bump it up to 3 if you want, but for me, in this build, I've had to cut it down to 2 for space issues. Next up, we have 2 Minerva. Card is obviously still very good, especially when you have all your combo pieces aligned. When you do have the Sanctuary in the Sky card on your side of the field, you can get counter traps back from your graveyard to your hand. Very important, and if you do set up, one of the most key basic openings is counter traps with activating Ties of the Brethren successfully with Minerva, Bountiful, and with Sage of the Sky, or an Honest, or whichever you prefer, on the field / in your hand. So being able to get to it is very key and crucial, but you don't really want to draw into it as much. You can if you want, but it doesn't matter if you don't, because you have Ties. That's why it's at 2, and that's basically why I have it there like that. Next up, we just have one Herald of the Heaven. This is just simply because we're playing one Sanctuary in the Sky, which we've seen a little bit. Next up, one Honest. So we have an Honest in here simply because of Ties of the Brethren. We're not playing the deck isn't dependent on Card of Demise, so therefore you can have cards in your hands, so playing an Honest is quite decent. You might say, well, Honest is at 3, so why are you not playing 3? Yes, you can play 3 Honest if you want, but it's down to... well, essentially it's down to space issues, and I really wanted to put at least one Honest in here for a name, because if you just didn't want to go, if for example you don't have Sanctuary in the Sky on your side of the field, getting Minerva is a little bit pointless, because yeah, okay, you're going to stack some attack and defense on it, that's it really. So you can go into this, you can go into Bountiful and add this back to your hand, and then you can at least protect one of your monsters from an attack. So, you know, it's really, really good for that, but going to multiple ones honestly depends on how your build is. So I am personally just playing one because that's all I care for. And then finally we have the Air Knight Parchef, because the card is good and you should play it. Next up, we have 3 Ties of the Brethren. This is what everyone has come to see, this is what everyone has come to want to play, and this is why you're probably watching this certain deck profile. Ties of the Brethren, very simple card, pay 2,000 life points, target level 4 or lower on your side of the field, and then you special summon 2 level 4 monsters, or 2 monsters of the same level, type, and attribute that have different names. So very simple, you can see what I special summon. Yes, obviously Ash is a thing, and it does, you know, cost you a card. But at the end of the day, with this, it's not the worst thing if it gets ashed, because you're only down a card. Obviously, the potential gains that you get from activating it and successfully resolving it are huge. That's why you play it. But it's not a be-all, end-all end of your deck. Just very, very important to know. I always play like my opponent has Ash. So it's normally one of either the first cards I play, and then I have other things to back it up, or I will leave it to the last minute and force my opponent to kind of go into the activation, and if I feel like I can wait until next turn to activate Ties, I will do that. So you need to be very careful, and I would wait until next turn, because then my counter trap's alive. That's why I would do it. So 3 Ties is fine. It doesn't get too cloggy in this build, because this is the type you want to run, and you'll see a couple of draw cards in a minute, so that's why it isn't a cloggy card. So the Sanctuary cards are these 3 Sanctum and 1 Sanctuary. Obviously they all count as Sanctuary in the Skies. Very good cards. In this build, the idea is to align everything with the Sanctuary in the Sky through Ties of the Brethren, so it's natural that we play this. Makes sense, don't really need to say too much about these guys. So going into some of the draw cards, we have 2 Pot of Desires. You might be thinking, wow, Pot of Desires, you're ballsy. Yeah, I am. So this is why you see I'm playing 3 Ties of the Brethren, because it means that I'm hopefully not going to banish all 3. It has happened once before, and it was very annoying. Pot of Desires is a decent draw card for the deck. You have a lot of multiple counter traps, you have a lot of multiple monsters, so it's unlikely that activating 1 Pot of Desires is going to turn off your Ties of the Brethren, because you still have 3 Bountiful, 2 Ariadne, 2 Sky, 2 Minerva, and a Honest, and also the Herald of Sky. So you have a lot of cards that you could potentially go into. You know, at a stretch you can go into the Herald of whatever the discard one is just completely left my mind. But there are ways that you can activate the Ties of the Brethren successfully, even if some of your main combo pieces have been banished by this. This gives you 2 cards, and if you think about it, one of the, and you saw in the replay at the start, activating Ties of the Brethren and then resolving this as well and getting 2 counter traps is just huge, because you also have a hand to play with anyway, and that's just 2 cards, and that's netted you another 4 cards from your deck. So it's pretty insane, really good cards. And this is one of the ones as well, if you don't mind, think your opponent has Ash, you can either play Ties or you can play this to bait it out, because they'll negate one of them. It just depends which one you activate first. So it's an important thing to note. Playing 1 Card of Demise, yes, 1 Card of Demise in here as just one of those luck sack draws. It is actually a very good card still, and even though we're playing things like Honest, even though it's at 1, and we're playing Ties which conflict, this is still a good card to run. You don't want to run 3, you don't want to run 3 Ties and 3 Card Demise, because it will clog. You will run into them always in your opening hands, and you'll have dead cards, and you'll be in the struggle of, do I activate this first or do I activate this first? Then it'll always be the wrong way. 1 Card Demise works perfectly fine. And then also a final kind of digging draw card is one Pot of Duality. The reason why I run one is because obviously we're heavily, the deck's big central focal point is special summoning monsters from the deck through ties. So having a Pot of Duality is at one is nice because it's unlikely you're going to see them both together. That's the same idea with running the Card of Demise. This was kind of one of these things where it was, do I run a Pot of Duality or do I run like an Upstart or another kind of just single draw card? The idea behind Pot of Duality is even though I can't use it with Card of Demise, I can't activate it with Ties of the Brethren, it just gives me that little extra bit of digging that I will prefer to do than just a simple one draw card. So that's why I'm running the Pot of Duality and it actually works out nicely. So going on to the traps, we have the Solemn Brigade, which I'm just going to show you here because obviously it's pretty obvious what they are. All amazing cards. You run them, you run them, you run them. I don't really need to say too much about that because you run them. Exact same with Majestic Dropoff. Again, I don't understand people who run less than 3 of this because it's one of your key pivotal cards. Now, let me just explain why it's better in this build than it is in any other Counter Fairy build. Even though I'm not discrediting why you're running 3 in other builds, because you should, but the maximum potential out of this card is just like tripled. So, if you have this card in your hands and then you activate Ties of the Brethren, you have this set, you're going to get a draw. If you have everything set up nicely, so if you have the Sanctuary in the Sky, the Minerva, the Bountiful, and the Sky, it means that you get a pop and 1,000 life points, you get a draw, and you get a counter trap back from your hand, from your graveyard to your hands. That's 4 extra effects from activating 1 card. So you see why this card is so insanely good, because it is a snap activation, as I said earlier in my previous build, in the previous video that I did. And because it's a snap activation, you get multiple effects off the activation if you do, if all the stars align, which they actually do quite often. So this card is just amazing and you should always run it. Next up, we have 3 Rebirth. Now, I've bumped this up to 3 in this particular build, and it's because you have a hand more often. Because we're not relying on Card of Demise, we've shifted our potential towards Ties of the Brethren, it means that you're going to probably have a hand. So having this card in here means that you can have it live more often because you're going to probably have cards in your hand. One of them will probably be a counter trap because you don't need to discard your hand in the end phase. Now, I'm not running Ultimate Providence, that's the word, it just escaped me then, the card. Ultimate Providence in this because this does the job better in this deck. You're always probably going to have a counter trap in your hand, or at least a point where you can have one, so you run this. And this card is just so good, being able to bring out everything from your deck and extra deck. Those Air Knight Par Chefs are just so good and so key as well. If it does get banished, unfortunately, with the Card of Demise, with the Ties of the Brethren, I'll try that again. With the Pot of Desires we got there in the end, you still have the ones in the extra deck that you can bring out, so it's not a bad thing at all. So the card is absolutely amazing. Next up, we have 2 Negate Attack. Now, I'm running Negate Attack in this build instead of the Mirror Force card that I ran previously. Why? Because this is better in this build. It's the exact same logic as running as Drastic Drop-Off in the fact that you get multiple effects off. This is exactly the same. If your opponent attacks into my monsters, like if I do resolve the Ties of the Brethren, this 1 card activation, again, nets me so many different things and will put me on top next turn. And it means that you can just hold back a little bit with what your opponent's doing if you know they're going to try and go for attacks. You can really hold back, rely on this card, activate it, and then, just profit from it. So Negate Attack is really good in this build, and is a actually quite important card. I would consider putting it up to 3, but space issues are horrible. 2 Grand Horn of Heaven, again, catches people off guard. It's really decent like that, so that's why I like running it. Next up, we have the 2 Divine Punishment. Now, obviously, I am running 2 Divine Punishment and 3 Rebirth. Rebirth is obviously very good and does the whole negation with, negates anything. Same with 2 Divine Punishment. Because we are focusing on the Ties of the Brethren build, because we are focusing on the Skies of the Sanctuary build, these are still good. 3 is a little bit cloggy because it does require multiple combo pieces. Well, I say multiple, it requires 1. But you want to remove that whole possible bricking aspect from the deck. And while there are a lot of combo pieces in there, you do need to balance it out with some that don't require anything to be activated / only require a little amount. So that's why we run 2, and it works out well. And then finally we have 1 broken line. As I said earlier, or just then, with the whole, we want to make sure that we have the combo pieces, but also we want to have cards that can be activated for free. This card is good like that, and as I said in my previous build, it is a very good kind of mindfuck piece as well. It's really good and gets your opponent thinking. I'm really confused as to what type of plays they're doing. I normally, unless there's a certain card in my opponent's zone that I know that they're going to activate at some point, I'll always put this in a extra deck link zone, because, or in the adjacent columns, or in the actual column, sorry, not adjacent, because it means that there's a good chance that it's going to be able to be activated for free, and it is just a decent card on top of everything like that. But I wouldn't play more, just because your opponent will catch on, and it is a good side deck card to use, or to side out. So going to the extra deck, we have 2 Avenging Night Parchef. Avenging Night Parchef. This is just fuel for Rebirth. You play 2, you don't need to play 3, because you have the other target that's in your deck. This extra deck is exactly the same as my other one, to be honest, because you don't really use it. So 1 Decode Talker, then the Utopia Engine, we just have 6 of them, so that we can get to double lightning if we so wish. The Heartland Draco, because you're pretty much always going to be able to get its effect off if you so need it, because you'll always have spell cards face up on your side of the field. The Dark Rebellion Dragon, if you want to get over monsters. The Dark Hand, if you want to extra negate random stuff. Babushka, Luminescent Knight, Anti-Luminescent Knight, and then finally Castell. As I said, I would have a Tornado Dragon, but I don't have one. So that's what you could put in the extra deck if you so wish. But the extra deck isn't important, it's all about the main deck. So, as I said, this deck is really difficult to build. It's really difficult to find a good balance to it. I really like this version of the Ties of the Brethren build that I've done, otherwise I wouldn't be showing it, of course. It's taken me a long time to find a good build for it. That I'm really happy with. It's taken a lot of testing, it's gone in a lot of different directions. Ever since the structure deck was released, or when the cards were announced, even when I wasn't playing, I still was poking at this deck every so often and playing it and testing it out, and I think this is probably the most happy I've been with a build. It's a good balance of draw cards versus combo pieces versus cards that stand on their own. Card Demise and Ties of the Brethren just don't work together. Don't put them both in a deck at max. Either choose one or the other. You can have 1 Ties of the Brethren and 3 Card Demise if you really want, but then you run into the problem of you have more monsters. Card Demise should only be run in a small monster lineup. Card Demise can be run at 1 in this, a very low number, because the chances of you drawing that Ties of the Brethren is very unlikely, together, and then you can selectively play it when you have monsters and so on and so forth. And then also the fact that you are running Pot of Desires as well, it's a chance it might be banished as well. So there's a lot of things to take into consideration. That's where the fine balance is. Pot of Desires certainly throws a curveball in there with consistency issues, but overall, I think it's good. I think it works very well, and a lot of testing has been done with it, and personally, I like it. So, I want to know what you guys think of this build. I know you were all waiting for it, so hopefully it wasn't too late for you. Let me know down in the comment section below what you think of the build and how yours are looking, if there are any changes you'd make. If there are any key cards you think I have missed, make sure to give me a like, comment, subscribe, and I shall catch you guys later.